right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for those of you who were made it out to visit with us in person, and thanks to all of you who are participating via the web. If I could briefly just have those of you attending on the web conference, if you would just confirm in the chat box that you can hear me okay through your speakers or through your telephone, whichever way you decided to participate. That way I know that you're all in successfully. And that way I also get a confirmation of all of you participating. And just so everyone knows too, I'm recording this and it's not 100% reliable that it's of good quality, but typically I'm able to get a good video capture of it, and then we will post it to the website as well so that you can go back and review the material that was covered, or for those that aren't here, you can share that with them and they can have a chance to view it as well. So we'll go right ahead and get into this. It's pretty straightforward for the most part. I'm just going to be covering the materials posted with the RFP, and then we'll have a brief period of time to cover questions and answer inquiries that you might have about the project. So again, this is welcome to this. Our school district is Nineveh Hensley Jackson United School Corporation. Those of you from the area may recognize it more as Indian Creek Schools. All of our schools are called Indian Creek. Even though the district has a different name. And this is our RFP, a request for proposals for a VoIP telephone system. So just a brief overview. So I'll do some welcome introductions. We'll walk through the RFP documents, talk about the evaluation criteria and process, just review next steps, and then we'll do questions. So as by way of introduction, I'll be doing most of the speaking, and it's not my favorite thing to do, but I figure it's important that I walk through this with you. Typically, I like to be in meetings and let other people talk, but my name is Mike Bottorff. I'm the Director of Technology here for NHJ. I also have with me our Network and Systems Administrator, Jared Green. Just briefly, I would like to go around the room and have everybody just introduce themselves, and the company that they're representing, and the folks online, if you would type in the company that you're working for and your role into the chat box so we can document that, I would appreciate that as well. So go ahead.
Sure. Lonnie Powell with CPI, based out of Indiana.
Yep. Coach Michael is also with CPI.
Bart Sonnen with Metronet. Trent Smith with the Non-Small Farrar.
Will Heffron, CenturyLink.
Bill Doherty with Gibson.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll get right into this so we don't waste anybody's time. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the RFP documents. And so we're looking at a slideshow here, but I'm going to take that slideshow down, and I'm actually going to pull up the documents of the RFP, and we'll review them that way. It'll be a little bit easier than looking in a slideshow format. So we'll spend most of the time on the first document. Let's see if I can get it over here, which is called Part 1, Enclosures and Exhibits. And it contains a majority of the RFP material. So I won't read this to you. You've all seen the documents, but I'll hit some of the highlights and give you some of the background and context and narrative that's important to our school district. The first thing is typically, and I know you're all familiar with the changes in E-rate recently, typically your phone services and such will be part of the E-rate selection process, but USAC and the federal government has decided to phase out telephone service, and we're only 2 years away from being down to 0 in terms of telephone service. So partly due to timing and partly due to just avoiding the paperwork of the E-rate process, we've decided to do the solicitation without E-rate funding. So that this will be outside that process, and it won't there won't be any reimbursement for any of the services, and we're going to forego that this year. The other important, a couple other important key pieces. Those of you who've worked with school districts in the past and telephone systems understand that a vast majority of our users, particularly teachers and support staff, do not need all kinds of advanced telephone features. So for the most part, they are very basic users. And then the heavy users that would use more advanced functionality will be your front office staff and your administrative staff. And that's pretty typical from what you're going to see in a school corporation. The one thing that we do have an interest in, and we can talk about that more a little bit later as I go through the requirements, some things that may not always fit with quote unquote a basic user, is we do have an interest in call recording features in the classroom, so that if teachers get in a situation where they have an angry parent or angry community member or something that would have legal implications, that they have the ability to record on their phone the telephone conversation. And then the other thing is integration with the public address system. And I know that's already come in with from some vendors as a question. So we would like PA system integration, and I'll have to pull that information. I don't have it in front of me, but we'll answer that very specifically in a response to the vendor questions about the PA system. Yes, question, sorry.
Michael, is your preference as far as call recording to support an ad hoc where they have to manually trigger the recording event, or are you more looking toward a full-time call recording system that administration can go to an interface and quickly retrieve any call that was made?
Okay, yeah. So for those of you online, the question was, are we interested in a full-time recording system that's going to audio record every call and have the ability to go back and search through those calls, or just an ad hoc one-touch call recording? We'd be more interested in the latter. We don't have a need to record every call that's made anywhere in the district at any time. It's really just a situation when our teachers or administrators feel a need to record a call for legal purposes, particularly if it's a special needs situation or a child protective services situation where they want a recording and gather evidence in that kind of situation. So yeah, we don't need a full recording constantly. So the other piece of background that I'd like to add at the beginning too, another reason we're doing this project is our existing system is very, very old. And some people had asked, some vendors had submitted questions about the current system. It's an old Nortel system. We run it on Call Pilot Administrator. When we post the formal response to vendor questions, we'll provide that actual system ID number. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it is a pretty old system, and it's not very functional, and there's been complaints about it long before I arrived here at school district, and I was informed that there was money set aside to do this. And so I said, sure, we will do this. Another piece of context, just so you know, and it was in the RFP, our school district size, we're about 1,800 students. In terms of staff, we have about 120 teachers and 50 to 60 support staff. And so we're in the realm of about 200 handsets, and that detail was provided in the RFP. And there were also some questions about how many of those are teachers, how many of those administrators, heavier users versus lighter users. I would say it's about 20% is just a rough estimate, 20% administrators and support staff that will be using more features than your teacher phones. But I will post, along with the answers to vendor questions, a more precise number of those. But I said that's a good rough estimate. So just to briefly cover the procurement objectives, of course, the primary thing is for us to install a new local phone system here on site. And just to clarify too, this came in as a vendor question as well. It does not have to be something that's hosted on site. It can be a cloud solution, but we do need new handsets and a new system to set up. So it could be either offsite hosted, the management software. It could be a cloud-based solution. We're not objected to that. It's just for the quantities and to try and explain what we're looking for more clearly, it's kind of written from an on-site point of view. but there's no reason that we couldn't implement a cloud solution, and we're not objected to that, or an offsite hosted solution. Along with that, we've kind of wrapped up 3 potentially separate projects into the same RFP. So the main core of that is the telephone system and the management tool and handsets and whatever that's going to be. But along with that, we need a telephone service, because right now our service is not VoIP based. So we need a circuit to provide those telephone lines. So that is the second part of it, and that could be provided by the same vendor, that could be provided by a separate vendor, than whoever's providing the telephone system itself. And then we do still need to retain a handful of POTS lines, and I don't know how many different vendors have the ability to provide that. I know there are restrictions around locally provided lines, so that may be a limited number of companies that can offer the actual local telephone service. And for that project C, the third project there, we need those primarily for emergency 911 lines and for alarm systems and elevators on site. And we need 8 of those lines. So, and the reason we wanted to do it all in one selection process, but they may be 3 different vendors based on the characteristics of those requirements. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and along with that too, just to be fair to all the vendors, we will evaluate each of the 3 separately. So you're welcome if you can provide all 3 to bid all 3, but we will score them each separately. And the latter 2 will be heavily skewed towards cost, of course, because there's not a whole lot of support service associated with the latter 2 as much as there would be the telephone system. So just to briefly go over the timeline, I first want to apologize a little bit. This is a little bit of a shorter timeline that I would like. I don't tend to like to cram a selection process into about approximately 3 weeks. But my hope was that the RFP was so straightforward and that the response forms are so clear that it will be easy for vendors to just chunk their information into those slots. And we've done this a few times here in this style, and we're getting pretty good at evaluating them pretty quickly. So we think we'll be able to stick to this. Our hope is to put the system in late June or throughout July and get it in and up and running before school starts. Our school starts the first week of August. It might actually be on the 1st. We have a teacher day on a Monday, and the students come in on a Tuesday. But I think for a little bit of additional context on myself, I recently put in a phone system at a much larger school district last year, Hamilton Southeastern Schools, 21,000 students, over 2,000 stations. And there were some hiccups and hurdles with that process, but not on the local phone system side on our sites. And I'm pretty confident that we could actually set up and roll out the actual equipment on site within about a week. I'm pretty confident we could do that. The hurdles sometimes rely, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the hurdles sometimes lie in porting the numbers and getting those circuits up and running correctly, more so than setting up the on-site equipment. So again, I apologize, but we're looking at a somewhat short deadline. So the response deadline is June 10th. Written questions due the 1st. I've already answered the vendor questions I've received. I've typed those up, and those are ready to go. So I'm hoping that after I receive the written questions on the 1st, that I can turn that around on the 2nd or the 3rd. I will post that to the website, and I'll email it also to everyone that I'm aware of that has expressed an interest. And then we're hoping to, within about 7 to 10 days, select a vendor and start putting the schedule together for rolling this stuff out. Another piece of context too, our school districts has been lagging behind on infrastructure for a number of years. So we're actually rolling out a number of big infrastructure projects. So starting next Tuesday, so we just ended school yesterday. Today's a teacher day. Monday's Memorial Day. Starting Tuesday, we're rolling out new fiber throughout the district. So we're going to have 10 gig fiber through all our buildings and networking closets. That's going to take about 2 weeks. Immediately after that, the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be putting in a new primary switch in all of our networking closets going to be a Cisco Meraki switch. And that's going to be basically all the other switches are going to be stacked to those primary switches. So all of that is going to have to precede this because the new VoIP phones that run over PoE are going to need to plug into that new Meraki switch. But we do have those scheduled on pretty hard dates. So unless something goes awry, we should be wrapped up with those in time to start this project. Okay,
Hey,
scope
Mike,
of
real
the
quick.
procurement, and I talked about these separate projects a little bit. So first of all, the on-site telecommunications equipment. This is basically for sizing. We counted up about 228 handsets that we're going to need. And there were vendor questions that came in, and do you need precisely that many voicemail boxes, or do you need more or less? I don't have an exact count, but I'll go through our extension list and determine exactly how many voicemail boxes we need. It may be 20 or 30 less than that for your sizing purposes, but it's not going to be dramatically different than what you see here.
Is that 210 or 228?
228, yeah.
Okay. Well, the numbers to the side total 210. So.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. These numbers here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 210 then.
Okay, I just want to.
No, that's fine. I'm glad.
On the correct
No,
page.
that's exactly why we do these, because someone else was counting more accurately than I was. So you're saying the sum of the numbers listed above are 210?
I believe so.
Okay, great. I just saved myself 18 handsets.
Yes.
No, it's the line item numbers are correct, and if the total is incorrect, that's because I added it wrong.
I see those are all VoIP phones. Any need for analog ports? Like analog phones, analog devices?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, is there a need for analog ports? We have a need for one analog port for the 911 lines, and our hope is that would run through the VoIP system so that teachers in their classrooms could still pick up and access that 911 line that way. If that's not possible, then we would need a direct line for the 911.
One 911 line for the whole district?
For each building, sorry, for each building. So four total 911 lines, and our hope is that will run through the VoIP system, but it's not required. It could just be a direct line to a single phone at the main office. Although in that case, then the teachers can't access it. So hopefully we'd like to run that through the VoIP system. We also need 4 other analog lines, but they don't need phones because they'll run into the fire alarms and the elevators. So they won't need a handset. But that would be part of the POTS lines.
You want to be close to the POTS line?
Yeah. We also have, I think, and I'll provide these precise numbers in the response to vendor questions. I think we have 7 fax lines, but we would like to run those into this system as well. We would prefer not to have them as a separate phone line. So there would need to be analog ports available. But again, those could be direct lines instead of running through the VoIP system. We'd like to run the fax calls through the VoIP system to the fax itself, but if not, it could also be a direct line. So basically,
Yeah, 7 spread out 2 per school, or
no, it's one fax per school, and then 1 for the administration building, 1 for facilities and transportation, and 1 for technology. I think I might have another one for athletics, so I might have 8 faxes. I'll double check my fax numbers. But the core idea is we'd rather not have additional direct lines running into those fax. We would like to bring them in on a single circuit into our VoIP system, and then have them connect through an analog to the fax, if at all possible. Because in the long term, that's going to be more simple for us to support and save us money on those additional lines. Did you have a question?
Yeah, and it was probably part of the questions that have already been raised.
Sure.
I'm assuming you're looking at like SIP trunking.
Sure. No. Yeah, that was also a question that will provide a formal response. The question that was submitted, the written question was, are you expecting a SIP trunking or like a T1 PRI handoff? We actually don't have a preference, honestly. It doesn't matter to us which one it is. I know when we previously did work at Hamilton Southeastern, the PRI handoff version was more reliable in terms of transmitting fax, and so I lean towards that just a little bit because we had fewer communications issues going the T1/PRI handoff versus a SIP, but we're not ruling either one out, in that terms, because we don't have an existing system that we're tied to. This is going to be a complete switch over onto something new.
Oh, I was just gonna, I don't know what your guys' opinion is, but I don't know what your experience has been with SIP and faxing.
Actually,
Yeah, it's not good.
It'll work some of the time.
If you want it to work some of the time.
Right. And so for those of you on the web conference too, my experience has been that the SIP is not as reliable for things like faxing and some of the things that we'd like to retain. So I guess keep that in mind as you're putting together your proposal. And then, and of course, the way we've divvied it up into 3 projects too. I mean, maybe you're just proposing the phone system itself, and someone else is going to provide, the telecommunications circuit, and that works just as well. And I'll cover, while we're still here, I'll cover just a couple things that came in by question. And again, we'll provide a formal written response. But as of August, as of now, our middle school and high school are connected into this single building. And then as of August, when the new school year starts, our intermediate and elementary will also be combined in a single building. So the termination points for phone lines, there's only one for the high school and middle school and one for the elementary and intermediate school. So even though we would like a separate 911 for each of the 4 buildings and a separate alarm line for each of the 4 buildings, you'll only have 2 termination points coming in. So that was one question that came up. I'm trying to think if there was another one. Hopefully I'll remember if we come to it. So this section here, I'm not gonna cover it in great detail. As I mentioned, as a school district, we don't use a wide variety of all the advanced functionality currently available in phone systems. So that's not a high priority, aside from possibly the call recording, which is not available in every basic system. The other thing to keep in mind, we're not the smallest of the small district, but we only have a 4-person IT staff. So we look heavily at ease of use. Because, for example, Jared, our network administrator, he handles all of our network switching, he handles our phone system, he handles all that. Oh, by the way, he also handles all of our servers and our VMware environment, and he helps our technician with imaging. So ease of use and simple to install and support is a big deal to us. Over fancy advanced features that might be nice, but are more complicated to set up. That's just the way we have to lean to get stuff done, especially this summer with all the projects that we have coming. And again, we're just looking at the features. So this section 2212 is just the things that we'd like available on the phone for one way or another, whether it's 1-touch or it's 2-touch or it's a menu. It doesn't matter, but we would like these available on the phones. Even the phones for the teachers. And some of this is pretty basic too: volume adjustment, do not disturb, voicemail, message waiting, things like that. Section 2213, these are optional. These are not required. These are just nice to haves. Again, we look at ease of use more so than anything. So anything that's going to make it easier for our tech staff to deploy or support, configure, or change the phone system, that is an advantage to us. And I know a lot of times in larger companies and private sectors, they do a lot with unified communications, easy to reach people, rich presence, stuff like that. We don't really have a need for any of that. The basic need we really have is the voicemail. So we need a fairly robust voicemail system that's going to handle, parents calling teachers, administrators, leaving messages, and accessing those. But aside from that, we don't need any fancy features.
You're forwarding to email. What's your email?
Oh, yeah, no, it's a good question. Forward to email, we're a Gmail. So we use Google Apps for Education. And we have some background in that in the IT department because we have a number of systems that send us email alerts, and they're able to send it through the Google settings. So the second project, obviously this is just the telecommunications service and not so much the phone system and handsets. Couple items, and this is, I'm sure you've experienced this in school districts, that people don't want to change their phone numbers. So one of the big things for the main VoIP service is we'd like to keep our block of numbers. Right now we have 2100, well, I'll do the whole thing, 317-878-2100 through 2199. We have the whole block of 100, which is more numbers than we need. We just like to take the whole block. So for this particular project, if you're bidding for that, please make sure that you can port those numbers from the existing location. And then in terms of Project C, just the local POTS lines, those are unlisted numbers. They're 911 emergency alarms. Some of our current POTS lines support faxes, but we're going to pull those off and put them on the block of 100 other numbers if we can. So there's no restriction requirement on those POTS numbers. They can be the same ones we have now. They can be different ones. It's not a big deal. So evaluation criteria. A little bit of holdover, even though we're not doing E-rate, cost still needs to be the highest for us. We have a limited budget. The good news is that I believe we do have a sufficient budget to implement the whole thing, but it's not more than that. And we aren't contingent on any E-rate funding. As I mentioned, we're outside the process, so we do have a budget allocation for this. But regardless, cost needs to be the first most important category. So it's 50% of the weight. And also then the next highest, 20% ease of use, like I said. And ease of use, more for the tech staff than for the end user. Yes, it's important for it to not be too complicated for our front office staff or our teachers to use, but we're more interested in how quickly and easily can we roll out a system, how quickly and easy can we change the system, because come August we'll have some teachers move on and new teachers come in after we've already set the system up, and right away we're going to be reconfiguring stuff or recording auto attendant messages and such. So that's the second most important, and then also functionality. So the minimum required functionality that we listed up there, that's going to do all of those things, and then if it has some advanced features that are valuable for administrators or teachers, that would be important in the functionality category. 100 points for vendor qualification, so 10%. Have you guys done this before? Have you done it for K-12? Those are really the two big things. You don't have to have had large clients because we are not a super large organization, at least not relative to other K-12 environments. And then we reserve 5% or 50 points for existing vendor relationship. And that's just in the case where if you've been a vendor in good standing with our district and provided quality service in the past, we recognize that. We don't like to just push vendors off a cliff if they've done a nice job for us. I think that's fair. And I've told this before. I said in some cases I've had existing vendors who I didn't give them the points. They work with us, but they hadn't earned the 50 points for really providing good service or advice or help when we needed it. So that's the evaluation criteria. I should also state too, there is a phase 1 administrative screening, but that's pretty straightforward. It's, do you have 3 other clients where you've done this? Are they K-12 school districts? I mean, we don't try that to make that a prohibitive, but we do put that in there in case someone comes in and they're a new business and they've put in 10 phones before, for some private business. We don't want to take the time to evaluate that company. We can't afford to bring them in and have them learn on the job, I guess, is the way it goes there. So there is a minimum requirement. That's the administrative screening. I have not yet had anybody fail to meet that. So basically, if people read that, they recognize whether or not they qualify. So the rest of this just describes in some detail what we're looking for under each of the criteria. It explains the formula for the cost scoring. we do our best to make the cost an apples to apples to. So I'll go look through and just doesn't necessarily apply to this situation, but just as an example, if some vendor proposes a locally hosted PBX, the phone system, and it requires installation in a server environment, some vendors will say, and this is what your Microsoft server license costs, or this is what your VMware costs. And if one vendor puts that in and another doesn't, I'll either add it to make it equal, or I'll take it out. If, for example, we already have server license and we have VMware. So that was maybe the other question I forgot. Someone had mentioned in a written question, do you have a VMware environment? Yes. We have a VMware environment. We have space in that environment. We have Microsoft Server licenses. So if your solution requires Microsoft Server or VMware, you do not need to price it. You do not need to include it. Explain that we need to set it up there, but you don't need to price that out. We have site license and we have VM space available.
Where is that located?
Oh, yeah. So all of that is in our data center. So we just have one single location. The data center is technically in the middle school, but it's almost exactly between the middle school and high school. And that's where our VMware is located. And we don't back up all our servers, though. We do have an offsite backup for which ones, Jared?
Right now, just a data one.
Okay, so our file storage, so our administrators and our teachers' file storage, we do have an offsite daily backup.
And also admin too.
So and admin. So that's run through a third-party vendor using Commvault. So we may, after the system is set up, elect to back it up offsite as well. But we already have that process in place. Competitive negotiation, that's just gives us some flexibility to clean up stuff to make sure that it's a fair valuation if we need to. Best and final offer, that will probably be, if we decide to do it, a brief vendor demonstration of maybe a half hour to an hour of the phone system, both the handset and the configuration process. I'll provide this information as part of the written response to vendor questions. But if we decide to do a best and final with a brief demonstration, it will be, I'm going to double check my dates. I can tell you what dates they are so you can pencil them in just to make sure someone's available. June something. June 15th, 16th, and 17th. So June 15th through 17th, if we decide to do that we need to see the systems to make a final decision, we'll do a brief demo. And so just make sure that you or someone from your staff would be available on one of those 3 days. Hopefully that's enough time. Okay, just for the folks on the webinar, I see some questions coming in the chat box, and I will address those during the questions period, so we'll cover that. Section 4, instructions to vendors. Basically, these are just guidelines on how to construct a proposal and what to submit to us. One thing I always like to point out, because this is important to some vendors, if you have proprietary information you're submitting, whether it's financials or just a process or some technical specs that are proprietary, just make a note of it on the proposal cover page. There's a box that says, I've included proprietary information. Check that box and then make sure you let me know, or that you mark on the pages which pages are proprietary. So as a public organization, we technically are subject to FOIA requests, but if you mark that as proprietary, I can withhold that and not disclose it. I've not had that situation come up, but I know that some people work hard to do things and don't want to just hand it out publicly. So the response content is pretty straightforward. It aligns with what we've described that we're looking for. Section 4.3, the required response format, I would just use this as a checklist, just to make sure that when you submit your proposal that you've included all these pieces. And the vendor response forms include this exact same list with checkboxes. So just make sure you've included all those things: the vendor response forms, the pricing forms, a sample implementation and training plan. It doesn't have to be one precisely for our district, although we'd appreciate that. You can provide sample training materials or a sample implementation plan that you've done somewhere else, just so we can see what the process will look like. Technical specifications, that would just be from the manufacturer of the product. You don't need to add anything to that. Just include those files. Whatever handsets or switching equipment you're proposing, include those there. Reference forms, I'll go over that in just a moment. Service invoice order form, just your standard quote process. Most important thing about that is if you have terms and conditions, a service agreement or terms and conditions for the purchase, make sure you include those. If that's on your standard quote, that's fine. If it's a separate document, please provide that. And then I'll just spend the last few moments here on our current environment. And I've covered most of this, but just to give you context, we're about 1,800 students at 4 schools. As of this fall, the 4 schools will be in 2 buildings, practically on the same campus. The only thing between the sets of buildings are the facilities and maintenance and bus barn. Our internet connectivity is pretty strong for our size. We have 2 circuits totaling 300 megabytes, and we don't ever really reach that. We typically use around half of it. I haven't even seen it come close to exceeding that amount. As I mentioned, I'll recap. We are installing new 62.5 micron fiber connections between the school buildings and within each school building's network closets. We are maintaining 50 micron connections to the facilities and maintenance building, to the administration building, and to the learning center, which is an alternative school building. But at those locations, at the facilities and maintenance building, I have 4 staff. At the admin building, I have 5 staff. And at the learning center, we have 2 staff. So they're well supported by the 50 micron connections. Other things to note, we have a Fortinet FortiGate firewall. We have a Lightspeed Rocket appliance. So you may want to consider how your solutions work with those, or if that matters to your particular solution. And also, as I mentioned, we're installing a new Cisco Meraki switch in each of our networking closets. Some additional context too on that. We are actually going to roll out 100% Cisco Meraki switches and 100% Cisco Meraki wireless access points. But the portion of that is more than 1 switch per closet is waiting on E-rate funding. So we have to receive our E-rate funding letter before we can move forward with the rest of it. So basically, we're going to roll out 1 switch per closet to get it in the system, to redesign our network and reroute everything. And then when the E-rate acceptance letter comes in, we'll install the rest of it. But for the purposes of this project, all of the VoIP phones, and especially if they are using PoE power, they're going to run into the new Cisco Meraki switches. And there will be enough ports available. There'll be a 48 port. Yeah, there'll be a 48 port PoE switch in every networking closet. So, and that will support all of the phones that we need. So in the high school and the middle school, that means that the PoE phones will run into 2 different closets. But in the rest of the buildings, it will just be 1. I do not have a network diagram other than handwritten, but I will before we implement this project. So if that doesn't help you now, I apologize, but if you end up being the vendor, we'll have one to work from. That's part of our summer work. I talked about the phone services. I talked about the current phone system, and that's that. So let's jump through the other documents briefly. They're usually a little more, usually a little faster. Okay, so really quickly. So part 2 is mailing label. Basically, this just simplifies the process for our support staff. So just affix that to the outside of your shipping envelope. That way, our administrative people know where it goes and doesn't get lost. Part 3, cover page. This is really just a signature page so that we know who the prime contact is or who the authorized contact is. So just fill out that contact information there, sign that, put that at the top of your proposal. And this is also where I mentioned before, if there's proprietary material, please check the FOIA box and then just find some method, either contact me directly or label it on the page what material is proprietary. And if there is a request to release the bid documents, then I'll withhold those. Okay, part 4, this is the vendor response forms. This is where you'll provide most of your response to the RFP. And we've tried to make it pretty straightforward. So this is the table of contents. We'll go through it here. Scope of service, this is just letting us know which of the projects you're proposing. Are you just proposing the on-site phones and that, or are you providing the whole package, or are you providing the circuits and the POTS lines? Which parts are you providing? This is simply a checklist of the forms that you need to submit, so to make sure that you've provided everything we asked for. Form 2 here is the minimum requirements. As I mentioned, it's not a high bar, but it helps us streamline the process a little bit. Need to be doing it for 3 years. You need to have 3 clients, preferably K-12 clients. And you have the ability, and this is tricky for us, and I understand that sometimes it's hard to plan for these things, but our goal is to implement this system and have it up and running between June 27th and July 24th. Now, that gives us a week's cushion from what I said when school starts, but teachers and administrative staff come back. So we'd prefer not to be working after the 24th to set it up, because there will be principals and staff on site using the phones. Form 3, executive summary. This is your chance to pitch your company and your product. So put 1 page in, or if you're providing both the on-site telephone equipment and the circuit or transport service, then provide a 2nd page describing that as well. But just tell us, why your service or your product is going to benefit us more than anyone else. So this is your narrative portion. Form 4 is a company profile. This is just facts and figures. I'm sure most of this is up on your website, but it's easier for us if it's in the same place, and we'll just look at all the vendor information. We do ask a few questions about, how much of your company is dedicated to this particular service. So obviously there's going to be some vendors, this is all we do phones. There'll be other vendors that have, some portions. So we'd like to see what that ratio is, and how large the company is. There have been some times in the past where, based on time restrictions or requests from superiors, that I've been pushed into doing a project like this faster than I would like, and we don't do the whole RFP process, and we don't collect this information, and it turns out that the vendor is in the red, and the vendor goes out of business when we try to implement the system. So just understand, this is not us trying to pry or peek under the covers. This is just us setting up to make sure that we can get the project done how we'd like to do it. Form 5, implementation and training. As I said, we'd like you to submit a sample. If you can do one for what you think our district would look like, that's great. That's a bonus. If not, we just want to see what the steps are, partly so we can see if you and your colleagues, know what you're doing, but partly, every system is going to be a little bit different. So the order and process, depending, for a cloud solution or for an offsite hosted solution or an onsite solution, is all going to be a little bit different. So that helps us get a sense for what it's going to look like. And then training plan. I'm a big proponent of training, especially in schools. I mean, teachers rarely use their phones. They don't all even use the copiers that much, but you hear those things and you think these are basic things, but it saves us in the tech department a whole lot of trouble if we get them some good solid training, provide them some good solid, shortcut sheets of how to do stuff, and that prevents them from calling us or prevents them from messing up the system. So that training stuff, again, don't need to recreate the wheel. Just send us what you've done before, so we can see how you do it. Service approach, this is mostly focused on after the system's installed. If we have a hiccup, if we have a extension routing issue, or we have to issue with the voicemail system, what's your service model? How do we reach you? How do you process requests? What are your response times? What can we expect in terms of that? In particular, if there are emergency situations, we'll want to look at, what's the priority one stuff. What constitutes a priority one issue with your phone system or your telephone service, and then how is that resolved? A lot of times, somebody's voicemail goes down. Okay, that's not going to be an immediate fix. We can a day or two we can get around to that, but other things might be a bigger issue. So, and this whole section effectively deals with that. How do we submit a service request? How do you respond? How can we monitor our service requests? So do you guys have an online system that you track it with? Can we get in there and see our service requests, look at the time to response, that kind of thing? And then the other thing too, how do you allocate the resources to all your clients too? So do you have dedicated people in certain regions? Do you move people around as needed? How do you provide that service and support? And then do you have any commitments in terms of response times or first call resolution type things? Form 7 is location is existing relationship. So this is what I mentioned before. Are you a current vendor? Do you have office in your primary office or a key office in the area? And the area, I mean, even though we're a little bit south of Indianapolis, is really Indy Metro area. We consider ourselves part of that region.
Is the current relationship, is that kind of a 0 or 50 or 0 or greater? So if a company's never worked for you, they wind up with 0 points?
Correct. Yeah. If you haven't done any work for NHJ before, it's a 0. But that said, existing vendors aren't guaranteed 50. So they, if they provided good service, we've worked with them in the past. I will say this. I do that for vendors who've done a good job for us. I've not yet had one of these determined by that. So, in fact, I can only think of one time I can think of a couple times where I had an existing vendor and they won a bid for a long-term contract for either a phone system or a copier system, but they would have won anyway without that. So we try not to make that. It's not a make or break. That is truly we really can't decide. These are almost two identical options. We'll go with the existing vendor that has done a good job in the past. Form 8 equipment. This is just a reminder. Hey, please attach the tech specs so we can take a look at them. And end user manuals and documentation. And then Form 9 is the ease of use. And the only thing I would say is this is also a narrative section, kind of like Form 3, your executive summary. Focus the Form 3 on what your company offers and maybe key advantages of the equipment you're proposing. In this section, please tell us how it's going to make our jobs easier. Primarily the tech staff, first of all, but then secondarily also our front office staff who are receiving lots of calls, and even perhaps maybe our teachers. If you think there's something in there that will make their lives easier, even though they rarely ever use the phone. Maybe it's dummy proof, and so they could use it twice a year, and it was easy. It was the first time. I don't know. So just tell us what's going to make everybody's lives easier here, because we're not an IT company, we're not a phone company, we're not even a sales organization that have people on the phone all the time. It's just the way it is. We're a school district, and so we'd like to know what's gonna make that easier for people. Almost there. Okay, this is part 5, the pricing forms. And this is Excel spreadsheet. This is the finance side of me coming out. So the first tab is just, again, put the contact name in, check the box for which of the projects you're proposing. This is a little reference table for our shorthands for the various buildings. And so basically, again, when you're filling this out, you can think like a finance person. We got one tab with the one-time cost for the equipment. So any piece of equipment that NHJ needs to purchase. So this definitely includes handsets. If you've got on-site equipment that we're going to own, then that would go here too. And you just really need to fill out this information, make, model. The building location is where it's going to be placed. So so for handsets, you are going to need to have a line item for each of these locations based on the number of handsets that are going there. You may need to have 2 if you have 2 different types. If you're saying, hey, these are the teacher handsets, and then these are the admin handsets, you'll need to put 2 lines in there, but we wanted to shortcut that for you. And then you put the list cost, discounted cost, quantity. The final column here should add it up for you. Double check just in case I built the spreadsheet wrong, or just in case you messed up one of the formulas when you were inputting. So double check the numbers, but it should total both the line item and the bottom for you. So that's the extent of the first tab here, the equipment costs. The second tab is pretty much the same, except in this case, this is more like a service fee. So if you're going to come out and help us install, or if you're going to help us configure, what's the line item price for configuring the system with your support? Because with a new system, we're going to need a little bit of guidance and training and getting it up and running. We may be able to go around and plug in all the handsets, no problem, but show us how to set up the system. So again, these are still one-time costs for setting up the system. And then for project B, so let me walk back just a bit. So this second tab has multiple tables. So table B is for the on-site telecommunications equipment, so the switches and handsets. Table C is going to be for porting the service, basically. So that block of 100 numbers, 2100 to 2199. If there's any sort of fee or setup involved, that would go here. And maybe that's nothing. I don't know, depending on how you're set up. And then project C would be the same thing for the POTS lines. So is there initial setup fee for getting a new POTS line for those 8 lines that we're planning to get? So that would be the one-time implementation cost. And then tab 3 is going to be the recurring costs. And similarly, we've broken it down by project. So under project A, this is going to be your maintenance and support plan. So presumably, you help us install a new district-wide phone system. We've got a bunch of equipment on site, 200 plus phones, and you offering us a support plan so we can call if we have a problem. So this will be the annual cost over 5 years for that support service so that we can call you up. So whatever you describe in your service approach in the vendor response forms, this would be the pricing for that. And then table E would be the price for the phone service. So what's the cost of just having that phone service? You get a monthly bill for your circuit of 100 lines. Project C, what's the cost of those POTS lines? And so in this case too, and I know a lot of times the phone service is a monthly cost, so you'll need to multiply it by 12 because we're looking for the annual comparison. So when you're coming into these pricing forms, you'll just do one-time equipment, one-time implementation, services cost, recurring costs, and then use the 4th tab, total cost, just to double check. This tab should self-populate. So if you've plugged in your information in tabs 1 through 3, then it's going to just put totals in this tab, so it'll allow you to double check.
Are you open to doing all of the equipment on a recurring model, or is it you're definitely looking for it to be a one-time?
So the question was, for those on the web, the question was, are you open to doing the equipment on a recurring cost or like a lease model or something like that? The finance person in me would love to say, yes, I'd like to consider that option. But in our scenario, we don't have additional funding in future years. And we have a budget for the equipment now. So really, we're going to have to, at the very least, in terms of the on-site equipment, we're going to have to just purchase it outright, at least the handsets, and then whatever the service is going forward, that's what that is.
Would you entertain a multi-year support agreement?
Yes, we would prefer a multi-year support agreement. We'd like at least a 5-year agreement to support the on-site equipment. And if you do longer than that, we'd be willing to consider longer agreements. I mean, these phone systems, they stay in school districts forever. And even if they didn't stay in school districts forever, I probably anticipate keeping a phone system for 10 years, regardless. But school districts tend to stretch that.
You want to pay the support piece up front as well, though, or is that?
No. The support can be an annual, yes, but we wouldn't want to distribute the equipment costs. So yeah, so if we got a 5-year support, we wouldn't pay all 5 years up. That would be an annual payment. So that's a good question. Thank you. And then the last form is part 6, and this is pretty straightforward. This is just reference forms, and this would apply to the vendor qualifications score in the evaluation criteria. I will say we probably won't use the references except for the finalists, but please go ahead and submit 3 references, preferably a K-12 school district, preferably in Indiana and of a similar size. It's helpful to us. But again, we won't call them probably unless we go to the best and final, the finalist demonstration piece. So just to close out the presentation portion before we go to questions, because I'd like to stop talking, but I'm still going to have to for a little bit longer. Just to recap, so the evaluation criteria, partly because of the nature of the phone system and the nature of our limited budget of what we have allocated, cost has to be the most important, 50%, 20% ease of use, 15% functionality, 10% vendor qualifications, and 5% existing vendor relationship. Just to recap the upcoming deadlines. So for written questions, you have until June 1st at 5 p.m. I believe that's Wednesday, right? Next Wednesday. And I've already gotten some, but please submit them by then so I can turn them around as quickly as I can. I should have those back out in a day or two. Response deadline, June 10th. You feel free to deliver it in person if you want to make sure. Most delivery services, UPS, FedEx, all arrive before 1 here. So if you do the next day before morning or whatever, they get here before then. So that shouldn't be an issue. June 15th to 17th, if we decide to do finalists, if there's no obvious, clear best choice for us after the proposals, we'll bring in up to 3 vendors to say, show us how your handsets work, show us how to configure the system, briefly walk us through its features. And as I mentioned before, most importantly, how it makes our lives easier. I don't even want to go into how difficult the Nortel is to navigate the call pilot. It's just, we could master it in a couple of years if we had that time, but we don't. So our hope is, regardless of finalist demonstrations or not, to turn this around and be finalizing an agreement about June 20th, so that within a week or so of that we can get rolling. So, and I know you guys typically are scheduled, probably booked a month or 2 out, and so hopefully we can move that quickly. And so we don't want to put an extra burden on you guys in trying to squeeze us in. And again, I think on our side, in terms of at least plugging physical equipment in, we can do that pretty quickly. We could probably do the whole district in a day or two. And the piece that will probably take us time is configuring and setting up auto attendance, setting up general voicemail boxes, setting up routing and things like that. And we're comfortable too doing those things remotely if that's easier to schedule. So we set up a web conference and Jared and or myself are online and we're walking through the setup in the system. We can do it that way too. So that's that. This is the question and answer portion. And let me do this. I received a handful of questions through from the folks attending on the web. And let me go through those questions first, and then I will take questions from the folks on site. So the first question that came through the chat box, does the school have Cat 5e wiring or better? That's a good question.
I'm not sure what Kurt would say before. But.
Yeah, so but I can make that easy for you. Well, no, I can't necessarily. Let me think. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, honestly. I know we have a lot of Cat 6 around. The reason I'm hesitating is I can't guarantee that it's everywhere. So I will have to check on that. I'm pretty sure it's Cat 5 or better everywhere, but the question's Cat 5e. So I will double check that and provide that information. I think in a vast majority of cases, the answer is yes, but I don't want to say unequivocally until I've double checked. To what extent will NHJ like to be involved with installation? Who will be unboxing, placing the phones, NHJ, the vendor, or both? We can unbox and place the phones. It would be nice if maybe one vendor staff would be out here to make sure that we're doing things correctly, give us a little guidance. But certainly we can go around and plug everything in. We have the resources available for that. Is the desire to mirror the current phone system setup, or are there any changes? The extension and dialing plan is going to be new. I'm going to redesign that in the next couple weeks. In terms of hunt groups or auto attendants, there may not be dramatic changes on that. We don't use very many of those right now. We have one call group because facilities and transportation share an administrative assistant. So when calls come in there, it's do you want facilities or transportation if she's not available to answer the phone. And there's similar one at the administration building. But for the most part, there won't be a whole lot of changes there. What are the storage retention requirements for call recording? Storage and retention requirements would be store and retain them forever. And I only say that because we'll probably only have, I can't imagine, less than six to 10 a year calls that need to be recorded. It's not, when I implemented the system at Hamilton Southeastern, they had a couple dozen, and they're 10 times our size. So I don't anticipate there being a heavy amount of call recording happening. We would just like to have that feature given the nature of school environments today. Next question, you requested connecting to an existing public address system. Do you know the vendor type? I don't have it offhand, but I will provide that in our response to written questions. Part of the reason is that I just don't remember everything that I need to remember off the top of my head. The other part is they are going to be installing a new PA system at the high school and middle school, but I don't have specific dates for that yet, and I don't have the specific system. Our assistant superintendent's heading that up, and we're just on hand as needed. So I will check with him to see if that's going to happen before this or after this, and that will determine which system that I tell you we're connecting to. I suspect it will need to be an analog connection, though. That's my assumption. So working assumption is that we'll need an analog connection in each of the 4 buildings to connect to the new system. Will a VoIP readiness assessment be performed as part of the new network installation, or will that need to be included as part of this procurement and the new Cisco Meraki equipment that we're including? I don't think so, but this question came from Ben in the chat box. If he can tell me what he means by readiness assessment, I can tell him whether it needs to be done or not. Depending on what's entailed with that, I don't think we'll need to do it. Off the top of my head, in terms of readiness, the only thing I need to double check is the CAT cabling. And if we have Cat 5e or better in all the locations that we need it. Aside from that, our internal network is definitely going to support a VoIP system. There's no question there. So I think we're okay. Oh, okay. Ben clarified. He said he wants to make sure the switches networking equipment is configured for quality of service within acceptable limits for packet loss jitter. Yeah, all of that will be set up with the new Cisco Meraki switches. Yeah, that will be part of the network switch installation that happens before this project. So yeah, we'll make sure that that is set up. And we'll reach out to the winning telephone system vendor too, to make sure that it aligns with whatever the proposed solution is going to be. Is there a dedicated Ethernet port in each VoIP phone location? I love it. Okay, no, that's an excellent question. So back a little bit earlier in this session, I talked about how we're doing network infrastructure upgrades. We're going to install one Cisco Meraki switch in each networking closet. And then when we get our E-rate acceptance letter, we're going to put the rest of them in. That's the same thing with the Cat 6 cabling. So we have approved funding and approved project for Cat 6 cabling everywhere for VoIP phone system. However, if that acceptance letter doesn't come in, we may need to daisy chain the phones into the computers. So to help vendors on this project, I would say propose a solution that will allow an internet pass-through for now, just in case we need to do that before we get our funding letter.
100 meg or gig phones?
I'm going to say 100 meg because we're putting in new cables, so that will come. So just to clarify for the folks on the web, 100 meg pass through on the phones because we aren't guaranteed to have a dedicated Cat 5e or better cabling yet for the phones, although that has already been approved and we're just waiting on our E-rate funding letter. Until then, please propose or include in your solution 100 meg pass through for the computers. And trying to make sure I didn't miss. So I think I've got just one more question from the chat room. For SIP trunks, is the intention for those to be delivered over the top of NHJ's existing WAN circuits best effort, or over a new circuit dedicated for VoIP with QoS? We don't have an intention, to be honest. We're open to both options. We're open to running a new circuit for the telephones or running it over the existing lines. If we run it over our existing circuit, and just to reiterate, we have a 200 megs from ENA. We have 100 megs from Lightbound. If we run it over the existing circuit, we would just need to be assured that it got priority.
Do you know who the underlying provider is for those circuits? I mean, it's not ENA. And it might not be Lightbound.
One of the two is Johnson County Fiber Network. I can tell you that. So sorry for that on the web. The question is who actually provides those lines, because we get the service from ENA and Lightbound, but they didn't actually provide the lines. One's Johnson County Fiber Network. I can't for the life of me tell you what the other one was. But I will look and find out.
Thank you.
So I will put that in the response to written questions, who actually owns those lines. I keep thinking it's Comcast, but that might not be right. I will look that up. So that's a good question. But in terms of whether we want to put it on our existing lines or run a separate line, the only thing I will say to that, we'd be happy to have a second line, but cost is a big deal to us. So if there's a reliable, robust solution that's already going to run over our existing internet circuit because we are not really pushing our bandwidth, then that might be a cost consideration more than anything. Certainly a dedicated line's more reliable, but I will leave that up to you. And if on that note, I will say feel free to submit that information or submit 2 pricing proposals if you so choose. So if you say, well, we prefer to provide a dedicated line, but it's going to cost X amount more, provide that price proposal, then provide it without. Because I don't want to rule somebody out just because they picked wrong on that. The biggest issue for us is what is the price difference. If it's within the realm that we can tolerate on our annual budget, then we could certainly go with a dedicated line. But we won't know that unless you provide both. So if that's something that's of concern to you and that a dedicated circuit will be so much better, then provide both so that we can take a look. We try our best to do a fair comparison of what's available. So that covers all the questions from the chat box. Are there other questions from folks in the room? Clarifications? Fire away.
Could we get the system ID, not the model, but the serial number of your current Nortel?
Yes. Yeah. The question was, can we get the serial number of the current Nortel? I'll post that and the response to written questions. So it will be in there. And if I don't get it right, let me know, and I'll make sure that it's in there. Other questions?
No door phones to worry about?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So the question is, are there door phones that we need to link to? So, people buzzing in. That came in also as a written question. So I'll make sure to double check. We do have those, but I think they're an independent system. I don't think they link into our phones at all. So I will double check that and put it in the response to written questions. But as far as I know, it's a no.
You providing power fail, battery backup?
Battery backup, yes. Yes, we will provide UPS battery backup. In fact, we're installing that in our data center, a brand new one, next week. So the data center's covered, and then we already have smaller backup units in all of our network closets. We may be replacing those with E-rate funding as well. Actually, we will be when that acceptance letter comes in. So yes, we will take care of UPS battery backup.
As far as ongoing support, we'll have like VPN access probably, or would that be possible?
Yeah, so for ongoing support, VPN access, we can set up VPN access. So if it's a locally hosted system and your support plan, we can set up a VPN access. Obviously, if it's a hosted or a cloud offsite, then that would provide the same functionality, essentially.
And then on your outbuildings, I don't know the distance really. Was there copper connectivity out there for, like you said, you wanted a fax machine maybe here or there? Just fiber?
I would guess that there is copper connectivity at all the outbuildings. I'm certain there is at the Learning Center because it used to be a house. I'll double check the others, but I think so.
I mean, tied back to the school.
Yeah.
Is there service running out there today? I mean, you're already pushing dial tone out there today?
Yes. Yeah. So today, so the three main outbuildings are facilities transportation, the administration building, and the Indian Creek Learning Center, which is right next to the administration building. It's an alternative school. Right now, we have fiber connection to each of those, and we push it out through the fiber. But I also think that they probably have direct service as well from a local provider, if that was part of the solution. So I know the Learning Center and the admin building
They
also.
do have a PoE port over there.
Yes. Yes, sorry, yes. They will all have switches with PoE available in all 3 locations. And each of those 3 outbuildings are going to have a new Cisco Meraki switch with PoE. Yeah. We good? Have I saturated you?
What VMware environment you're running now? Is it the release number?
Do you remember what number?
556.
I haven't checked.
We'll have to check. Okay, so the question was, what's the VMware release number? What are we running on? And we don't know. I'm sure it's 5 or 6. I don't remember though. Come on, you gotta have this on the top of your head, Jared. So we'll provide that as an answer to the written questions as well. I know that came in the written questions. Yes.
When do you anticipate getting your funding letter back? How long?
No idea. So the question was, when do you expect your E-rate funding letter from USAC? And I've just built up contingency plans to work around them, and as frustrating as that is, just for reference, so those of you that have been doing E-rate for a while, we work with AdTech because AdTech does everybody. They're super helpful, and we've talked to them. And I asked our consultant, I said, so at what point can I start calling them every day and tell them to send me? She said, wait until June. So we'll see. In a couple of weeks, I might just make a daily call to see if I can get our funding letter. I mean, we made ours very, very straightforward. I know it gets complicated if there's services bundled in or non-E-rate eligible items, and it's all rolled in together. Ours was cut and dry, about as cut and dry as you can get it. So I would assume that they would just look at it and say, yes, go. But we're certainly hoping that it will come in over the summer. Otherwise, the remainder of our infrastructure upgrades will have to squeeze in over fall break. So that will be a fun time for us. Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much for attending today. Thanks to those who have participated over the web. Again, if you missed something or had another question come up, please submit it as a written question. We try to be very thorough with our answers to written questions and posting that information. And we will post a recording of this pre-proposal conference so long as I did it correctly. All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
So I'm curious, the data center, is it here in this building?
That's something we
It
can
is,
get
but
a look
it's
at before we leave.
We need to look at it.